Ethan Cole reviewed applications the old way. He knew it was inefficient. His HR director, Margaret, had told him so at least a dozen times. There were algorithms now, she said. Systems, weighted filters that could rank 200 candidates in the time it took him to read 3 cover letters. She had demonstrated one for him in the spring using last year's pool, and it had, in fact, done exactly what she said it would do. He had thanked her and told her he would consider it. He had not considered it. He still did it by hand. He sat at the long oak table in his office on the 32nd floor, the Chicago skyline pale and overcast beyond the glass, and he read, each folder in sequence, each name, each school, each line of experience and aspiration, assembled by someone who wanted something from him, and who had spent time trying to explain why they deserved it. He went slowly. He corrected for the tendency to form impressions from the first paragraph and let the rest confirm what you already believed. He turned pages without hurrying. He respected that, the wanting, the effort of putting it into words. The stack was not small. Cole Capital ran a competitive internship program, 12 slots per cycle, and the spring pool had drawn 417 applicants. Margaret had pre-screened to 60. He was responsible for the final 20, from which the panel would select 12. It was a Thursday in November, and outside, the wind was doing something unkind to the flags on Michigan Avenue. He had been at this for 2 hours. He had drunk 2 cups of coffee. He had made notes in the margins of 13 folders, questions he wanted asked, angles worth exploring. One gentle no that he delivered with a small horizontal line through the candidate's name, which felt more honest than an X. He turned to the next folder. The name at the top was Lily Bennett. Economics. University of Washington. 3rd year. GPA noted, not remarkable, sitting in the range that suggested a person who had chosen to be interested rather than to be ranked. The cover letter was brief, 4 paragraphs, which he appreciated. The ones that ran to 2 full pages generally said less. She had worked 2 summers in a small investment firm in Seattle, junior analyst work, the kind where you built models and debugged other people's assumptions and learned what competence looked like up close. The references were solid. The essay at the end of the packet was what stopped him. She wrote about compound interest, not as a mathematical concept, but as a metaphor, the idea that patient choices accumulate, that what you do quietly for years becomes visible all at once. She compared it to the slow growth of a forest. No individual tree's daily growth is noticeable, but return in a decade, and the landscape is entirely changed. She used no jargon. She never told the reader what to feel. She simply laid the idea out and let it stand. He liked that. He made a small check mark in the margin. Then his eye moved to the personal information block at the bottom of the first page, the standardized section, and he read the date of birth, the 14th of September, 2005. He read it again, the 14th of September 2005. The room did not change. The wind still moved the flags outside. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed at something and the sound came through the wall, muffled and indistinct. Ethan put the folder down on the table, flat, the way you set something down when your hands need a moment to decide what to do next. He placed both palms on the table surface. The wood was cool. He was 44 years old. He did not need a calculator. He had the number before the calculation was finished. 19 years. 19 years ago, give or take a handful of months, was the autumn. He and Clara Whitfield had said goodbye in a lobby in New York City, and the way she had looked at him, not angry, not crying, just quiet, in a way that had always been worse than either had stayed with him, in the category of things he did not revisit on purpose. He had a category for those things. He kept it organized. He picked up the folder again, looked at the photograph in the upper corner, the small headshot required by the application. A young woman with light brown hair pushed back. Something careful in her expression. The photograph was not particularly good. The kind taken quickly against a neutral background. He looked at it the way you look at something when you are not sure what you are looking for, and when you are afraid of what you might find. He found nothing conclusive. He found enough to keep him from putting the folder aside. After a long moment, he wrote one word in the margin, below the check mark. Interview. His handwriting was steady. He was not. He left the office at 6:30. His son, Noah, was 12. And the housekeeper left at 6, which meant that for 30 minutes each evening there was a window of technical unsupervision that Noah had thus far not exploited in any way that required Ethan's formal attention. He had mentioned this to no one. The apartment was on Dearborn, 12 minutes from the office by car. Ethan walked it when the weather allowed, which Chicago did not always. Tonight he walked. He needed the cold. Noah was at the kitchen table when he came in. A geometry textbook open beside a plate of crackers, a pencil tucked behind his ear, in the manner of someone who had decided a pencil behind the ear was what serious work looked like. He glanced up when Ethan came through the door. "You're late." 30 minutes, Ethan said. "Mrs. Harlow left at 6. I know. I was alone for half an hour. You survived." Noah considered this assessment and seemed to find it acceptable. He returned to his geometry. Ethan hung his coat, washed his hands, and assembled dinner from what was in the refrigerator: leftover soup, bread, 2 oranges. He set Noah's portion on the table without announcing it, and sat across from him and ate without speaking. This was a routine they had developed without ever discussing it. Noah ate when the food appeared. Ethan ate when he sat down. Between bites, Ethan looked at the grain of the table. After a while, Noah said, "Do you remember a woman named Clara?" Ethan looked up. Noah was not looking at him. He was drawing something in the margin of his textbook, a small triangle inside a larger one. "You said her name once. When you thought I was asleep, on the phone, a long time ago. I was like 8. Ethan set down his spoon. "Why?" he said. "Just wondered," Noah said, still not looking up. "You had a voice." A different voice than normal. Ethan did not answer. He picked up his spoon again. Noah erased the triangle and drew it over. Later, after Noah was in his room, Ethan stood at the kitchen window and looked at the street below. The city went on doing what cities did. He thought about a lobby in New York. He thought about the way Clara had held her coat against her chest with both arms, like she was cold. Though it was September and not yet truly cold. He thought about how he had not said the thing he should have said, and how she had not waited to see if he would say it, and how the revolving door had taken her, and that had been that. He was 44 years old. He had a company. He had a son. He had built a life that by any reasonable measure was a good one. He did not think about what it was not. He made a point of not thinking about it. Tonight the point failed. They had met at a conference. Neither of them was supposed to be there. Ethan had been sent by his firm to fill a seat vacated by a senior partner who had developed food poisoning in spectacular fashion at a hotel in Midtown. Clara was presenting a paper on behavioral economics that had been accepted 6 months earlier when she was in a different city working for a different firm, and she had driven 4 hours rather than cancel, because canceling was not something she did. She had told him this later. He had believed it immediately. He had sat 3 rows from the front. She had spoken for 40 minutes without notes, which was unusual in that context, where most people read from slides or, at minimum, kept a page of bullet points on the podium as insurance. She did not need insurance. She spoke the way people speak when they know what they think and have thought about how to say it carefully, and the combination produced something that felt less like a presentation and more like a conversation with a very precise and confident person who happened to be standing at the front of a room. He had not retained much of the content, which bothered him then, and would have bothered him more if he had understood at the time how rarely he would feel that particular kind of distraction again. The content, as he later reconstructed it, was about the gap between what people said they valued and what they actually chose under pressure. He found this ironic only much later. Afterward, he had found a reason to introduce himself. She had found a reason to continue the conversation past the point where conversations like that usually ended. They had eaten dinner at a place neither of them had chosen. A Thai restaurant 2 blocks from the conference hotel that had been suggested by the waiter who brought their cocktails, and they had talked until the staff began stacking chairs. He did not remember what they had talked about. He remembered the way she listened fully, without performing the act of listening, just actually doing it. He remembered that she had a habit of tilting her head very slightly when something surprised her, as though she were trying to receive it from a different angle. They were together for 11 months. He was in Chicago, she was in New York. They managed the distance in the practical way that people manage distance when they want to weekends: phone calls, a calendar that required coordination but never felt like effort. She flew to Chicago twice when he could not get away. He drove to New York once, in November, through weather that made no logical sense to drive through, and she met him at the door of her apartment with 2 bowls of soup and the particular expression of someone who is deciding not to say what they are thinking, which he had learned meant she was moved and did not yet know how to place it. She was the kind of woman who made the ordinary texture of life feel purposeful. He did not articulate this to himself at the time. He recognized it only in its absence. The trouble came in August. He was offered a partnership at Cole & Marsh, the opportunity he had been constructing his career toward for 6 years. It required relocation to Chicago full-time, which he was already doing, and the kind of total commitment that partnerships at firms like Cole & Marsh required, which was to say total and not apologetically so. His managing partner, a man named Douglas who had been married 3 times and considered this a reasonable trade-off for the life he had built, had been direct. This was not a season for distractions, personal or otherwise. He had said it with the tone of someone dispensing wisdom and not cruelty. And this had made it worse. Ethan had not told Clara about the offer for 3 weeks. He told himself he was still deciding. He knew he was not. He was doing what he had done before with difficult information, holding it in a separate part of his mind, where it could not contaminate the decisions he was already making. When he finally called her, he was already in Chicago. He had transferred his last boxes 2 days before. He told her about the partnership. He did not tell her he had already accepted it. She did not cry. She asked 2 questions, both of which he answered honestly. And then she said she understood. And she sounded like she meant it, which was somehow harder than if she had not meant it. He had wanted some version of anger, something he could answer. What she gave him was clear-eyed acceptance, and he did not know what to do with it. 2 weeks later, she called to say she was transferring to Seattle. There was a position she had been considering for some time. The timing worked out. He said he was glad for her. She said thank you. He said goodbye, in a voice that sounded wrong to him even as he said it, the voice of someone performing a conclusion rather than arriving at one. He did not call again. He told himself it was kindness. He had believed this for nearly 20 years. He did not sleep well that Thursday night, or the 3 nights that followed. He was precise about it. He lay in the dark doing what he was trained to do, which was analyze the available information and determine the most probable interpretation. The date of birth on the application was the 14th of September 2005. Clara had left New York in January of 2005. The phone call in which she said she was going to Seattle, the phone call that had been the last time he heard her voice, had been in October of 2004. The conference where they had met had been in November of 2003. He ran the numbers. He ran them again. He got up at 3 in the morning and went to the kitchen and sat at the table where Noah had been doing geometry and stared at nothing in particular. The building around him was quiet. The city was not. He thought about the transfer to Seattle. The timing works out, she had said. He had taken this as the statement it appeared to be. A position. Good timing. The logic of a practical woman making a practical decision. He thought about it differently now. There were things he could not explain away. The timing was one of them. The silence after was another. Clara was not a silent person by nature. She was thorough and deliberate, and she followed through on things. If she had wanted to stay in contact, she would have stayed in contact. She had not. He had interpreted this as acceptance. He now considered the possibility that it had been something else. On Sunday morning, he opened the internship file on his laptop and looked at Lily Bennett's contact information. Seattle address, University of Washington. The pieces sat on the table in front of him, small and specific, and adding up to something he could not yet allow himself to name. He sent an email to Margaret scheduling the interview for the following Wednesday. Then he closed the laptop and made Noah pancakes, and did not mention any of this, which was easier than it should have been, and which told him something about how long he had been practicing the habit of not mentioning things. Lily Bennett arrived 11 minutes early. This was something Ethan noted, because he noted things. He was in the small conference room off the main reception area, the one used for first-round interviews, when Margaret knocked and told him his 9:15 was in the lobby. He asked her to send the candidate up in 10 minutes, and spent the 10 minutes looking at nothing and arranging his thoughts into something orderly. When Lily came in, she was composed in the way that people are composed when composure costs them something not effortless, but earned. She wore a dark blazer that was slightly too formal for the occasion, which told him she had thought carefully about what to wear. Her hair was light brown, pushed back. Her eyes were the color of amber. He had her mother's eyes. Ethan kept his expression as he had trained himself to keep it, which was to say open and professionally attentive. He stood and extended his hand and said, "Lily, thank you for coming in." She shook it with appropriate firmness and said, "Thank you for the opportunity," and sat in the chair across from him and placed her hands in her lap. He asked the standard questions. She answered them well. She was not the most polished candidate he had seen that week, but she was the most honest one. When he asked her about her academic weaknesses, she named a specific one, econometrics, second semester, and explained what she had done about it. He appreciated specificity. He believed in it. "Why capital markets?" he said. She considered the question. "Because money is just one form of deferred decision-making," she said. "The market is really a record of what people chose to believe at a given moment." "I find that interesting." He looked at her. "My mom would say I think too abstractly," she added. A small, dry smile. "She's a structural thinker, very linear." "What does your mother do?" A pause. Brief, but there. "She works in urban planning. Seattle City office. She likes systems with clear parameters." Another pause. "We're pretty different." "That's often useful," Ethan said, and moved on to the next question, because the alternative was to stop moving, and he was not prepared to stop moving in this room. He extended the interview by 12 minutes beyond the standard length. He did not need to. He needed to. When it was over, she stood and shook his hand again and thanked him, and he said they would be in touch, which was what you said. And she walked out of the conference room and down the hall toward the elevator, and he sat for a moment in the quiet. Her handshake was firm. Her nails were short. She had a small scar on her left wrist, pale and old, and he did not know what it was from and could not ask. She had not mentioned her father once. He did not know whether this was significant or simply how she had always understood her life. He thought it was probably the second thing, and he thought this was entirely his fault. He told himself he would think about it for a week before doing anything. He gave himself 3 days. He spent those 3 days in the usual way, which was to say working, attending meetings, reviewing documents, making decisions at the speed his position required, and with the confidence his position required, and doing none of this with his full attention. The remaining portion of his attention was in a folder in the internship file on his hard drive, and he could not close the folder without it simply reopening. On the 4th day, he asked his assistant to book him on a Thursday morning flight to Seattle, a same-day return, and gave a reason involving a prospective client relationship he had been cultivating on the West Coast. The reason was not entirely false. It was also not the reason. He found Clara's professional contact through a city government directory, urban planning, infrastructure division, senior analyst. A name and a title and a department. He had a general neighborhood through a connection he was not proud of using. A professional contact who had worked briefly with Clara years ago and who maintained the kind of loosely updated awareness of people from one's past that becomes possible when enough time has passed to make the curiosity feel harmless. Ethan did not feel harmless doing it. He did it anyway. Because the alternative was arriving in Seattle and knocking on the door of the wrong house, which was a different kind of wrong. On the flight, he did not read the reports he had brought. He looked at the clouds over Montana and thought about what he was going to say. He tried openings. He tried direct ones. I saw her application. I need to ask you. And he tried careful ones. The kind that left room for retreat if she needed it, or if he did. He discarded them all. The right beginning was probably not a sentence. It was probably just showing up, which was the thing he had not done for 20 years, and which was the only thing that made sense to do now. He was not comfortable with uncertainty. He went anyway. The house was smaller than he expected, which was not a judgment, just an observation. A craftsman bungalow with a covered porch and a yard that was tidy without being formal. The kind of yard that belongs to someone who does their own maintenance on their own schedule. There were plants on the porch steps, late season and past their best but still present, still being kept. A bicycle leaned against the railing with a lock still looped through the frame. Someone's daily transportation. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment longer than he needed to, long enough that a neighbor walking a small dog gave him a brief look. Then he walked up the steps and knocked. He heard movement inside. The particular kind of movement that happens when someone is not expecting company and is making a small decision about whether to answer. A pause of perhaps 10 seconds. Then the door opened. Clara looked at him across the threshold and did not speak for what felt like a long time, but was probably 4 seconds. She had aged the way people age when they have spent the intervening years doing things rather than worrying about them. Her hair was darker, cut shorter, practical in a way that suited her. She was thinner. She looked exactly like herself, which was the only way he could think to put it, not like a past version, not like a memory, but like the ongoing actual person that he had managed to misplace for 2 decades. "Ethan," she said. "Clara, you should have called. You would have told me not to come." She looked at him for another moment and then stepped back from the door. He took it as an invitation and stepped inside. She made coffee. It was a thing to do while not doing the other thing, and he understood this and let her do it. He sat at the kitchen table, which was small and wood, and had a surface that looked like homework had been done on it for many years. And he waited. She sat across from him and wrapped both hands around her mug and looked at the table between them. "She applied," Ethan said. Clara nodded slowly. "I know. She told me." A pause. "She didn't know I knew you. I didn't tell her about us. What did you tell her about her father?" A long silence. Not the silence of someone who had no answer, but the silence of someone who had a very specific answer they had carried for a long time and were choosing now whether to set down. "I told her he was a good man who didn't know," Clara said. "I told her the timing was wrong and the choice was mine. I told her when she was old enough to ask. And she asked at 11. And I told her the truth, which was that I had loved you and made a decision I believed was right, and that I would make the same decision again, even knowing what I know now." "I would have wanted to know," Ethan said. She looked at him then, directly. "No," she said. "You would have felt you had to know. That's different." He opened his mouth and closed it. He thought about Douglas and the partnership, and the words total commitment, and the way he had spent October of 2004, arranging his life with a precision that had left room for nothing unexpected. "Why didn't you tell me when you found out?" he said. "Before you left." "I found out after I left," Clara said. 6 weeks after that phone call. She said it without accusation. Simply. "And by then," she stopped. "By then, I'd already understood something about how you made decisions. I didn't want to be one of the things you had to account for. You should have let me account for it." "Maybe," she said. "I thought I was protecting you. Or protecting myself. I've never been entirely sure which." She looked at her coffee. "I didn't do it to punish you. I want you to know that. I genuinely believed she would be fine. And she is. She's better than fine." "I know," he said. "I met her." Clara looked up. "She's composed," he said. "She's smart. She thinks in metaphors but grounds them in evidence. She's the kind of person who arrives early." He paused. "She has your eyes." Something shifted in Clara's expression. Not quite a smile, something quieter. "She has your stubbornness," Clara said. He almost laughed. He didn't. "I want to tell her. I want to." He stopped, because he did not know how to finish the sentence in a way that was not too large. "I want her to know." Clara was quiet for a while. "She's 19, she said. "She gets to decide what she wants to do with that information." She looked at him steadily. "Not you. Not me. Her. I understand that. Do you?" "Yes." She studied him. He held it. After a while she nodded, a single small movement, and looked back at her coffee. "Give me a few days," she said. "I'll talk to her first. She deserves to decide how she wants to come into it." "All right," he said. They sat there a while longer. The kitchen was quiet. A clock somewhere in the house measured time in the ordinary way. Outside, Seattle was doing something gray and steady with its weather, and the light through the window was the color of late November, which is to say it was the color of things that have run their course. He did not stay long. There was nothing else to say yet, and he was learning, slowly and at some cost, that not every silence needed filling. Margaret sent the internship decisions on Monday. 12 names. Lily Bennett was on the list. He reviewed the panel's notes, which were thorough because he hired people who were thorough. Her case had been argued by 2 of the 3 reviewers on the basis of the interview performance and the written materials. The third had initially ranked her 6th, but had revised upward after reviewing the project submission again. No one had flagged irregularities. No one had any reason to. Ethan had extended her interview, which was noted, but he extended interviews occasionally, and for documented reasons. And his documented reason, exceptional essay, demonstrating synthesis across macro and behavioral frameworks, was accurate and not invented. He had not tipped the scales. He had not needed to. She had earned it on her own terms, which he had believed she would, and which he confirmed now with something he identified as relief, and then corrected, because relief was not precise enough. It was the satisfaction of a thing being what it appeared to be. Not a gift, not a correction, but a straightforward result. He had ordered a DNA test through a private clinic downtown, the kind used primarily for estate and legal cases that required a high standard of documentation and a low standard of visibility. The process had required a sample. He had retrieved her water glass after the interview under the pretense of clearing the conference room, which was not something he had ever done before, and which he thought about with something that was not quite guilt but was adjacent to it. He was not proud of the method. He believed it was better than the alternative walking into her life, with a claim he could not substantiate, and he held this belief, and the discomfort of his method, in the same hand simultaneously. The results came back on a Tuesday afternoon, in a plain envelope addressed to a name that was not his, a name he had given the clinic for discretion, a middle name he had not used since childhood. He left the envelope on his desk for 4 hours before he opened it. He went to 2 meetings and a call. He signed 3 documents. He returned to his desk at 6:15 when the floor was quiet, and the city outside the windows had shifted into its evening register. He opened the envelope. He unfolded the sheet. He read the number once. 99.97%. He folded the sheet in half, and then in half again, and placed it in the inside pocket of his coat, against his chest, where he could feel it when he breathed. He gathered his things, and left the office, and took the elevator down. At home, Noah was doing homework again at the kitchen table, with the same geometry textbook, which Ethan had begun to suspect might contain more problems than a geometry textbook reasonably should. He knocked on Noah's door later, and Noah pulled his headphones down. "You okay?" Noah said. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Just checking. You look like something happened." "Something happened," Ethan agreed. "I'll tell you about it when I understand it better." Noah looked at him for a moment, with the particular attention of someone who has learned to measure what adults say against how they say it. Then he nodded. "Okay," he said, and put the headphones back. Ethan went to the kitchen and stood at the window for a while, looking at the city, which did not offer any particular counsel. He thought about what Clara had said. Not you, not me, her. He had always believed that fatherhood was a thing you arrived at, a role that found you and shaped you. He had arrived at it with Noah in a courtroom rather than a delivery room, through custody papers and a woman named Renata, who had needed someone to take her son while she figured out what she was able to give. He had not figured on loving Noah the way he did the specific, daily, unremarkable enormity of it. He had not figured on a lot of things. Now there was another child, grown nearly into a woman, who had never had the chance to figure anything about him, who had been raised without the category for him in her life, who had made herself into someone without him as part of the materials. And she had done it well. He could see that she had done it well. He put the kettle on. He waited for it to boil. These were the things available to him on a Tuesday night, and they were enough, and they would have to be enough, and he was learning slowly, and at a cost. He was only beginning to measure how to be present in what was available rather than elsewhere in what was not. Clara called him on a Friday. "She wants to meet you," she said. "Her terms. Her place. She picked the spot, whatever she wants," he said. The spot was a park bench near the lakefront, the south end of Lincoln Park, where the path curved close to the water and the joggers thinned out by late morning. A Sunday in December, cold and clear. Ethan arrived first, because he arrived first at things. He sat on the bench with his hands in his coat pockets and watched the lake do what the lake did in winter, which was to be gray and serious, and not particularly interested in being observed. He heard her before he saw her, not her footsteps, but the shift in the atmosphere that happens when someone is moving with intention. She came down the path in a dark coat and a knit hat pulled low, and she walked the way her mother walked, with the weight evenly distributed, not hurried, not performing the act of going somewhere, just going there. She sat on the other end of the bench, not close, not distant. There was perhaps 4 feet of space between them, which felt both very small and very considered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The lake continued its business. A gull went low over the water and was not interested in them. "My mom told me what she could," Lily said. "I know the basic outline." "All right," he said. "I have questions," she said, "but I'm not sure I need all the answers right now." He looked at her. She was looking at the water. "That's fine," he said. "You didn't know," she said. It was not a question. She was establishing something, not interrogating it. "No, but you also." She paused, choosing words, the way he recognized people, choosing words when they have rehearsed them and are now second-guessing the rehearsal. "You didn't try to keep a door open, you let it close completely." He considered the careful dishonesty of saying this was not his choice. It had been his choice. Not the door specifically, but the set of conditions that made closing it the natural result. He had chosen those conditions with full awareness of what they excluded. "I let it close," he said. "Yes," she nodded once, the same absorbing nod he had seen in the interview. She had a way of receiving information without immediately responding to it, holding it for a moment before it went anywhere. It was one of the qualities that had impressed him in the interview. He noticed it differently now. "I'm not angry," she said. "I thought I would be. I'm mostly," another pause, "I'm mostly curious about who you are, whether it matters to me." "That's a reasonable position," he said. "My mom raised me alone," she said. "She did a good job. I had a good childhood. I had what I needed." She said this clearly, not defensively. "I don't have a gap I need you to fill. I'm not here to fill anything," he said. She looked at him for the first time directly. Her amber eyes measured something. "Then, what are you here for?" He had thought about this question specifically. He had thought about it on the bench before she arrived, and on the flight to Seattle weeks before, and in the kitchen of his apartment in the small hours of several separate nights. He had prepared answers. He had tried honest ones and careful ones, and ones that made him sound better than he was. He had prepared for this question, the only way you can prepare for something like this, which was to sit with it until all the prepared answers fell away and something simpler remained. "I'm here because you exist," he said. And because I didn't know, and now I do. And pretending I don't know is something I'm not able to do. She looked at him a while longer, not warmly, not coldly, with the seriousness of someone who is deciding whether a thing is true. Then she looked back at the water. Did you love her? She said. My mom. The cold off the lake was particular, the specific cold of December water and open sky, and the end of the year. He felt it on his face, and in his hands, and he did not try to diminish it. Yes, he said. I just wasn't brave enough to let that be worth something when it cost me something. She was quiet, a long quiet. He did not fill it. Then, that's an honest answer. It's the only one I have. They sat there for a while. He did not know how long. The joggers continued past, in their steady, solitary orbits. Someone was walking a large dog that strained toward the water with uncomplicated enthusiasm, straining against the leash with its whole body, wanting what it wanted without apology. At some point, Lily pulled her hat down slightly against the cold, a small unconscious adjustment, and the gesture was so completely ordinary, so entirely human, that something in his chest did a thing he had no precise name for. He did not try to name it. He let it be what it was. I start the internship in January, she said eventually. I know. I'm going to work hard, she said. I don't want anything because of... She gestured vaguely between them, at the air that held whatever this was. Because of this, I know, he said. I watched your interview. You earned it. The panel agreed unanimously. She seemed to receive this without either comfort or discomfort, the way you receive a fact you already suspected, but needed confirmed. She stood from the bench and pulled her coat straight in the brisk, efficient way of someone who is accustomed to cold weather and does not argue with it. I'm not ready to. She stopped. I don't know what I want this to be, or if I want it to be anything. I understand that, he said. I might need time. Take what you need. She looked at him one more time. Something in her expression was undecided, in the specific way that things are undecided when someone is genuinely considering them rather than simply withholding. He valued this, the real undecidedness of it, because it was honest, and because it was hers, and because it meant she was approaching this as something to be considered rather than something to be refused. Okay, she said. She turned and walked back the way she had come, her footsteps even on the path, her coat dark against the gray December light. He sat there after she was gone and watched the lake and thought that this was probably the most honest conversation he had been in for a long time. Which was true and also indicting. He stayed with the indictment rather than walking away from it. He believed that staying with difficult things was the beginning of something, though he was not yet sure the beginning of what. He sat there until the cold was too definitive to ignore. Then he stood and buttoned his coat and walked back toward the street, and the park was quiet behind him, and the lake was what the lake had always been, which was patient in a way that required nothing of him. She started on a Monday. He knew she was in the building because Margaret mentioned it, briefly, in the context of the internship cohort orientation. He did not go to the orientation. He stayed in his office and had a call with a fund manager in Boston and spoke for 40 minutes about capital allocation in a way that required all of his professional attention, which was what he needed it to require. He saw her for the first time in the building at 11:15, in the elevator. She was with two other interns, a young man with glasses and a woman who was describing something with her hands. Lily was listening with that characteristic quality she had, the full attention, the lack of performance. She saw him when the elevator doors opened. Mr. Cole, she said. Even. Professional. Miss Bennett, he said. Also even. He got off on his floor. The doors closed behind him. He stood in the corridor for a moment and then walked to his office and closed the door and did not look out the window for a while. Noah met her by accident in March. He had come to the office on a Saturday, which happened occasionally during school breaks, a concession to the practical fact that Ethan sometimes needed to work on Saturdays and 12-year-olds occasionally needed to accompany their fathers. Noah occupied a corner of the conference room with a book and his headphones and managed this with good humor. Lily was in the building on Saturday because she was a person who came in on Saturdays, which Ethan had been informed of by two different people, and which he had not had any comment on. She was at the coffee station when Noah came in looking for something to drink. Ethan heard none of this. He only heard about it afterward, from Noah, at dinner. "There was someone here today," Noah said. "A woman. I think she's an intern." "All right," Ethan said. "We talked for a while. She's at UW. She was telling me about economics." He considered his rice. She explained compound interest in a way that actually made sense. Used a metaphor about trees. He looked up. She was cool. Ethan looked at his son for a long moment. Noah looked back at him with the direct and uncomplicated gaze of someone who had not yet learned to look for the things behind what people said. "I'm glad," Ethan said. "Clara called him in April. Not about anything specific. She said she was calling because Lily had mentioned the office, the work, the way things were going. And because she thought he should know that Lily seemed, and Clara said this carefully, the way she said things not unhappy about it. She said you left her alone," Clara said. "She said you didn't make it strange." "I didn't make it strange. She noticed," Clara said. He was at the kitchen window again. The city had begun its tentative approximation of spring, the trees along Dearborn doing their first soft work. "How are you?" he said. A pause. "I'm fine," she said. "It's a lot to process. All of it. I know. I don't have regrets about the decision I made," she said. "I want to be clear about that. I understand. But I also," she stopped. Started again, carefully. "I think it was good, her going there. Even if I didn't know what it would mean. She's exceptional," he said. "The internship coordinator says she's the strongest first year they've had in 4 cycles." Clara said nothing for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had a texture he recognized from a long time ago. "She works hard," she said. "She's always worked hard. I know where she gets it," he said. A short pause. Then, very quietly, Clara laughed. It was a small sound. It was real. They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing in particular, which is to say about the specific texture of their ordinary lives. And when they hung up the call, he stood at the window for a while, with his hand still on the phone, in the way you hold something after it's already been put down. On a Friday in May, at the end of the first internship cycle, Ethan stood at the window of his office and watched the city. The trees on Michigan Avenue were fully themselves, green and moved by a wind that for once was not unkind. The sky had the particular quality of late afternoon in spring, when the light goes long and generous, when the city looks like a version of itself that is trying its best. He had approved the internship extension list that morning. 12 names, 8 of whom were being offered extended placements into the summer cycle. Lily Bennett's name was on it. Third from the top. Recommended unanimously by her supervisory team. Her project lead had used the word exceptional without prompting. He had read this in the evaluation report and had reread it once and then moved on to the next item on his agenda. Because this was how things worked when they were working properly. He had approved the list without comment or alteration. This was the correct thing. It was the only thing that was correct, and he was glad it was also easy, because he had not known in advance whether it would be. At some point in the afternoon, she had stopped by the administrative floor to hand in her final project summary, and he had been in the copy room adjacent to the reception area, not hiding but present, and he had heard her voice asking the receptionist something about submission protocols, and he had waited in the copy room until the exchange was finished and her footsteps had moved away. Not from avoidance, from something more like respect. This was her space too now, and she had made it hers on her own terms, and he did not want to be the thing that complicated that. He thought about Noah's face at the dinner table in March, describing compound interest in the metaphor of trees, saying she had explained it in a way that actually made sense, with the simple satisfaction of someone who has received good information and is pleased to report it. He had not told Noah. He would, when the time was right, which was something he was also learning. That the right time for difficult things was rarely immediately, but was also rarely as far away as caution suggested. He thought about Clara's laugh on the phone in April. Small and real. Arriving without announcement. Gone quickly. He had held the phone after the call ended and stood at the kitchen window and let himself understand that the categories he had organized his life into past and present, loss and compensation, what he had chosen, and what those choices had cost, were perhaps not as sealed as he had constructed them to be. He thought about a bench by the water in December, and amber eyes, and the word okay said by someone who meant it as a beginning rather than a conclusion. His life had a shape he had believed was settled. It had turned out to have a room he did not know about, and the room was occupied, and what was in it was not what he would have planned, and was not what he had earned, and was real, in the way that only the unplanned things are entirely real. Without his management, without his approval, just there. He was not foolish enough to call this a happy ending. He knew enough about compound interest to understand that what you had now was only what you had now, and that what it became depended entirely on what you did next, and after that, and after that. He had been making choices for 44 years, and they had all accumulated into this moment at this window, in this city, in this particular May light. He would make different ones now, not better in the way that erases what came before, better in the way that builds on it honestly. The window held the city. The city went on. He picked up his coat. He had a 12-year-old at home who needed dinner and would report, with the authority of someone for whom 30 minutes constitutes a significant duration, that he was late. He had a daughter who had asked for time, and whose request he intended to honor completely and without hurry. He had, somewhere in Seattle, a woman who had made a hard decision alone and made it well, and with whom he had spoken for 20 minutes about nothing in particular and felt, for the first time in a very long while, like something was properly open rather than properly closed. He took the stairs.